If you like to read books, then you're probably aware that a lot of them aren't good. I find that many readers like me are rarely interested in the hot new releases hitting shelves these days. I'm far more likely to find a dead writer I love and explore their backlog of greatest hits than venture into recent releases and award winners. There's gotta be a reason for that, right? About 2 months ago, YouTuber Jumi Kim posted a video titled "Why I Hate Most Contemporary Novels." I was immediately drawn to watching this. Great, straightforward title, right? And I'm always looking for a smart person's validation for why I just don't seek out a ton of contemporary fiction. I'm gonna focus mostly on this video because although she has a relatively small channel at around 140,000 views, this video is resonating with a lot of people and is one of many examples of this sentiment cropping up across YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And this video showcases many arguments I find compelling and a few arguments that are especially very bad. This should go without saying, but anyone compelled to send hateful messages or harassment to this person is horrible. Don't do that. Jumi Kim has a presence on Twitter and has made some other YouTube videos that I'm not really going to get into. I want to just focus on this one video. The video starts off really strong.
In this video, I'm going to tell you why I hate most novels today. I'm not saying I hate all of them, but if you go to the bookstore and you look at the books that they're promoting, you know how usually there are books that are out on tables because they're new or they're the ones being talked about or they won awards. If you were to randomly sample some of the books being promoted, chances are most of them will suck.
I like that she mentions this because I can relate to that, right? I often see a table of new fiction displayed at every bookstore and think, how good can these books actually be? In all likelihood, the majority of these books represent whatever the publishing industry has gambled on to most actively promote, books that have congealed into a perfectly moderated crust of literary prestige and middle-brow entertainment. Books that aren't all that challenging but might make for a decent summer read. At least this is the impression I get. Jumi goes on to say,
So I'm not talking about the books that everyone expects to be bad, like stuff that everyone understands to be cheap thrillers or romances or whatever. Everyone knows they're purely for entertainment.
Some of the most snobbish highbrow readers of fiction I know acknowledge that some of the best fiction comes from genre categories. To say books everyone expects to be bad like cheap thrillers and romances, you're already, in my opinion, playing into reductive marketing terms. Are the works of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler just cheap thrillers? Is Lonesome Dove a book everyone expects to be bad? Some of the most impressive writers today work in genre fiction. S.A. Cosby, Jordan Harper, Ted Chiang. It seems to me that one of the positive changes in publishing, of which there are very few, is that genre is not as separate from the realm of highbrow fiction as it used to be. Okay, well, let's go along with the video's premise.
My issue is with the books that win the Pulitzer Prizes or are the finalists for the National Book Award.
The award winners, the book club picks.
Because they're supposed to be more highfalutin. They're the literary books.
Highfalutin books, she says.
They are terrible in a particular way that I think is unique to our times.
Great, so at this point, we're not only going to look at what is making these books worse, but what is making society worse. I'm ready to learn something new. Let's stop beating around the bush and get to the heart of the matter. What is going on?
At some point, I realized that whenever I walked into a bookstore and picked up one of the books that they were promoting, it kind of seemed like every other book was some kind of LGBTQ book or had some themes of racism or misogyny or something like that. For example, I did a quick check on the last 6 years of the National Book Award, so going back to 2000. 5 out of the 6 were explicitly woke themed.
I wouldn't have picked this video to talk about if it didn't also include some other claims about literature today, if it didn't in some other ways try to expand on different arguments, which we'll explore in a bit. But unfortunately, about half of the video's runtime complains about wokeness in books, and if you're gonna do that, you need to get a little bit into what you think wokeness is. It's such a widespread and vague term. You've got to be specific. At this point, you're losing a huge portion of your audience, right? People are long familiar with the anti-woke movie critics, the anti-woke game reviewers, people who freak out when a beloved female character wears shorts. I'm saying that if you're starting your 37-minute video about the decline of contemporary literature with this, it's not looking promising unless you make some original claims and back it up with great examples. Fortunately for us, she does offer some examples of bad woke books.
For example, I took this picture at a bookstore, and this is the first table you see when you walk in, and just very quickly looked up a description of each book and noted which were either gay or trans or mentioned things like misogyny or white guilt or something like that in the description of the book. So I'm talking either on the back of the book or the inside flap cover for hardcovers.
Surely this can't be her only means of figuring out whether a book is woke or not, right? You just read the description and figure out if it is gay or trans. I mean, how many gay characters does it need to have before it becomes a gay book? And because it's gay or trans or mentions misogyny or white guilt, does that automatically make them bad?
I don't care per se if a particular book is about trans or gay or misogyny or whatever. And I'm not saying those novels shouldn't exist. I have nothing against those kinds of books existing, and I'm not saying that they're all bad or anything like that. It's fine for gay stories or whatever to be told.
Oh, thank God. See, it's okay for gay stories or whatever to be told. James Baldwin, you're safe. You're good, man.
But I'm saying that they seem to constitute a much higher percentage of contemporary literature than what you'd expect given the actual gay or trans population, and it seems like they're being pushed on us.
All right, so this is a pretty significant claim that these gay books are being pushed on us. You know, it's a claim you see conservatives saying about woke themes in virtually all media. The woke books are being pushed on us at a table of Barnes & Noble.
I looked up the books here, and here's what I found.
So she goes through a sampling of the books that she saw at some table at Barnes & Noble. She doesn't include what the table is called or what its theme is, or, I mean, for all we know, it says super woke books, and at that point, you only have yourself to blame for perusing that table. But just based on what's offered here, they're all hardcovers. I assume it's just general new fiction. So these are the books she picks out as examples of woke books.
This one, the silver book, is at once a queer love story and a noirish thriller. This is according to its own description.
So I looked this one up. Yes, the phrase is used in the description on Amazon. It also says, art, power, desire, and illusion collide in a hypnotic new novel from Olivia Lang, set in the months leading up to the murder of Pier Paolo Pasolini in 1975. So it's historical fiction about the Italian film industry that sounds really interesting. Notice how Jumi dismisses it as woke and therefore not worth reading simply because the description calls it a queer love story. I think what she's trying to do in this segment is bombard you with icky woke words that, for a certain type of viewer who only sees the term queer love story as inherently bad, will make you think there's some agenda being pushed by big woke book. Has Jumi read any of these books? No. She's simply going off of the marketing, and it shows what kind of viewer she expects to have watching this video, one who sees Stag Dance push the limits of trans writing as inherently negative again.
Then there's this one called Stag Dance. Again, according to its own description, it pushes the quote, limits of trans writing.
Later on in this video, Jumi complains about writers who preach only one perspective, who moralize and expect the reader to applaud them simply for saying the right things. On this point, I completely agree, but Tori Peters is a hilarious author to complain about in this regard. I haven't read Stag Dance, but I read Detransition Baby, and it's a very thorny, very messy book about trans characters behaving badly, making mistakes. I've seen Tori Peters get criticized for writing about trans people in ways that aren't always flattering because she writes about trans people as people. She writes great characters, trans or otherwise, and just because she's a trans writer doesn't mean she can't write perceptively about the human experience. But let's dismiss Stag Dance entirely because the description says it pushes the limits of trans writing, just as we will dismiss these other books.
This one, if you read the description, you'll quickly realize it's about a gay guy who also happens to have a homophobic brother. This one, Sweet Fury, a, quote, bold critique of Americans' deep-rooted misogyny. This one mentions in its description that one of the themes is the way that whiteness and power protect their own. This one, it's about 5 Black women, and I don't think that in itself is something that makes a book woke per se, but it did mention in its inside flap cover that one of the characters gets famous for calling out her employer for, quote, plans to whitewash fraught history.
I find it funny that she dismisses the book about a gay guy with a homophobic brother, but clarifies there's nothing wrong with a book about 5 Black women. I mean, good, but this is what I mean. Like, what the hell do you mean by wokeness? Is it just stuff that makes you uncomfortable? How is a book about trans writing more or less woke than a book about a gay guy or 5 Black women? By the way, she is pointing to the wrong book here. She actually read the description for The Wilderness, and the book description mentions in a list of character introductions, Monique, a librarian and aspiring blogger, finds unexpected online fame after calling out the university where she works for its plans to whitewash fraught history. Who's to say there is no deeper exploration of this subject? Why assume the writer is preaching or pushing some kind of woke agenda? This sets up a recurring pattern in this video in which Jumi rails against preachy literature that expects you to agree with it, something I also do not like. Yet at the same time, she can't imagine a writer with left-leaning politics making art that isn't preaching their politics. She goes on to say about The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong.
There were other books that you could categorize as woke because, for example, this one does have a gay protagonist, and on Amazon it's listed as a #1 bestseller in LGBTQ plus literature, I guess because the author is gay or queer or something, but I'm not even going to count this one as woke just because it doesn't sound like the gay thing is a big factor in the book.
Okay. Who determines that? And is this not just one of the funniest examples you could use in a book about the fall of contemporary literature? Ocean Vuong is beloved by many, yes, but also despised for his type of prose. Every other day on Twitter, he sparks discourse about his style of writing. I would love for a video to dissect what works or doesn't work about Vuong's writing and what it says about contemporary literature in general. But instead, we're here talking about how this doesn't count as woke because it doesn't sound like the gay thing is such a big factor in the book.
I'm just going to stop here because we already have a lot on this table here where the woke part is pretty front and center of the book.
I'm not going to stop there because I got curious about what she excluded here. Let's look at the scary woke table again, shall we? You might notice a new book by legendary screenwriter and filmmaker, director of Lone Star and Eight Men Out, John Sayles, front and center. To Save the Man is historical fiction in the vein of Never Let Me Go and Killers of the Flower Moon. That sounds incredibly cool. What about One of Us by Dan Cheon, a sort of upmarket horror novel? What about Jonathan Letham's new book of short stories? He's the author of Motherless Brooklyn. There is a range of offerings here, and I went a step further. I actually read one of these woke books based on Jumi's recommendation, thank you. I read the one about the way that whiteness and power protect their own. The book is called Greenwich, and it's Kate Broad's debut novel. Was it a good book? It's all right. It kind of hooks you with like a crime mystery and then drags you along a coming of age story with a girl who's like immersed in the wealthy world of her aunt and uncle. The prose is fine, mostly functional, and at times reads like a YA novel because our protagonist is pretty young. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's what you'd expect to see a big celebrity announce as their book club pick. It'd make a decent beach read. This brings me to my own critique of what Jumi calls highbrow literature. This stuff, the stuff on this table, is not highbrow literature. This is by and large upmarket fiction, aka book club fiction. And look, these are all just marketing terms. When you look at the broad group of people still buying and reading new releases in 2026, a smaller chunk are reading fiction, and an even smaller group of that are reading these kinds of books, mostly women. They're the where the crawdads sing type of readers. The type of books that have mass appeal but aren't too challenging and touch on contemporary topics. Historically, these books get forgotten over time. The ones that stick for good reason. If publishers are selling these books with explicitly woke terms, that probably means it works for the audience they're trying to reach. Publishing is a business. If publishers could find a way to sell the next big upmarket anti-woke book club book, you know they would, but it doesn't make sense to do that. The people following the Read with Jenna book club are not the same people seeking conservative fiction. When I go to my local Barnes & Noble, I see tables like this, recommending the next Where the Crawdads Sing. I also see a huge end cap with 50 books about Charlie Kirk and how America is dying. Publishers just want to sell books. There's not a huge crossover between people who want to read The Emperor of Gladness and who also want to read True Allegiance. Greenwich tries to sketch morally complex characters and explore topical themes. It doesn't always stick the landing. My issue with the book is that you feel the author's anxiety to keep the reader turning the page. Why can't challenging form-breaking fiction become bestsellers? Jumi goes on to look at the last 6 years of National Book Award winners to see which are explicitly woke themed.
For example, I did a quick check on the last 6 years of the National Book Award.
And it turns out 5 of the 6 are explicitly woke themed.
5 out of the 6 were explicitly woke themed.
Did she read the books? Oh, no.
Just based on what the book's description said. I put a summary of my findings here, and you can pause the video to look at that if you want.
So let's see the damage here. How woke are these books? Interior Chinatown, a shattering and darkly comic send-up of racial stereotyping in Hollywood, a deeply personal novel about race, pop culture, immigration. I looked this one up. This seems like a pretty fun, not really challenging book. Hell of a book, 2021. It's about racism. Okay, well, come on, that's kind of reductive. In the Amazon description, hell of a book is at once about family, love of parents and children, art and money. It's also about the nation's reckoning with a tragic police shooting, playing over and over again on the news. This seems like it's dealing with contemporary topics in a way that is relevant to today. This seems like a typical upmarket fiction book that would be interesting to people who are interested in this genre. The Rabbit Hutch, 2022, NA. So I guess there's just no wokeness in Rabbit Hutch. Blackouts, 2023. Description mentions queer multiple times. Oh my god. The true story. The main character is a high school teacher and, quote, the neighborhood homosexual. James, 2024, a reimagining of Huck Finn from the point of view of the slave Jim. Here's the thing about James, a book I only know about and haven't read, and it highlights my issue with the publishing industry. Retelling of classic novels are super big these days. It's not usually a genre I'm into. Percival Everett has been writing incredible fiction for years, but the publishing industry seemed only to anoint him very recently. James was given the full rollout, the full confidence of the publishers. It felt like everyone's saying together, this is the big one. Why? Because retelling of classic books are super big right now? Is it because Erasure was turned into an Academy Award nominated film? Jumi has a point in calling out the National Book Awards. In fact, more people should be calling out how stupid these big literary prizes are. William H. Gass wrote an old piece about the inherent uselessness of literary awards. In it, he writes, an award-winning book did not necessarily have to represent the private tastes of the judges or the board. It represented, rather, their judgment that it would be good for those who read it. Strive and Succeed might have been the appropriate name for most of the winners, for that is what they preached. He wrote this in 1985, mostly about how often the Pulitzer Prize overlooked the truly great art of its time. Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow was struck down by the Pulitzer Advisory Committee, and they just decided not to give the award to any book that year. Awards typically work to prop up popular taste. They are rarely judging based on quality alone.
Now, just to be clear, it's not even the wokeness that bothers me so much about books these days. I can actually still enjoy a book even if it has some wokeness. Like, if the wokeness is just sprinkled in a bit here and there and I can just roll my eyes and move on. But the bigger problem for me is that this is a symptom of a much bigger problem we have in literature today.
Wait, hold on. Wokeness isn't what bothers her? Because that's been the video so far. Why would you front load your video like that?
So many of our writers buy into a certain narrow worldview, which happens to be that of the college educated liberal. And in this worldview, you can often pick up on a kind of simplistic morality where it's obvious who the good guys and the bad guys are.
To this, I generally agree, but you can't always blame the writers themselves. This is a trend plaguing all the arts. In a country where public funding of the arts is basically non-existent, and where all art is fighting against a deluge of AI slop, and where regular people are working so hard just to stay alive, just to keep a roof over their heads, it's no wonder why typically the most privileged, the already wealthy, have the free time and flexibility to pursue the arts. Later in the video, Jumi mentions MFA writers as being an issue with contemporary literature, and that is a complaint that I see all the time, and I understand. I don't think there's an issue with people studying writing, and having the time to practice your writing is only going to make your writing better, but the people who pursue higher education at this level typically have some financial support to make that possible. So often we get books from MFA writers that are about MFA writers, or are about the upper class, or about academia. There's nothing wrong with this, as Jumi points out herself, but this limits the range of voices writing literature. As she says,
good literature makes you look at the world differently, or it gives you new insights into the way things are, or it might change how you interpret what's going on in the world. Fiction can put you in another person's shoes much more than movies or TV shows.
I don't know how one can express this sentiment and then rail against wokeness in books just because. She explains that she continues to read fiction because she cares about writing that reflects what is going on in our own crazy time, novels that talk about the present. This exposes my deeper issue with Jumi's perspective. Focusing on the wokeness is dumb, yes, but this gets to the heart of it. I agree that I want books exploring the messiness of now. Though I've only read a couple of the stories so far, Tony Tulathamute's 2024 short story collection, Rejection, seems to do just that. His writing is thorny and difficult and challenging, much in the same way I see certain movies grappling with challenging subjects. Eddington, whatever you think of it, earnestly dissects social problems like hyperpartisanship. The drama was a super interesting exploration of cancel culture, and that was a relative box office hit. The literature of today, if I were to make broad generalizations, is more and more interested in saying the wrong things and exploring people being bad and incorrect. I think that throughout the 2010s and early 2020s, there was much more of a homogenized worldview in literature. Remember hashtag own voices and the hyper-focus on policing of what writers could or couldn't write about based on their own identities? While well-meaning in some regards, it led to writers and publishers and readers being incredibly neurotic about what they could or couldn't read or write. This trend has fallen by the wayside along with some other publishing trends. I mean, why not mention that in this video?
Here's the fundamental issue we have right now. In order to write interesting books, a writer needs to, first and foremost, be able to see. They need to be able to pick up on the interesting things that are happening around them and interpret them with fresh perspectives. And having fresh perspectives means you have to sometimes question your assumptions.
Absolutely, I agree, but why does that exclusively mean left-leaning writers and not those on the right? It just seems to me that Jumi wouldn't mind a didactic novel as long as the message the novel preaches is conservative. I find didacticism annoying from every angle, to be honest. I don't think the solution to making books better is to just make them preach from the other side. I'm going to move along a little faster here because Jumi starts covering specific issues she has with some recent books. She complains extensively about Sally Rooney, author of Normal People. She's a huge author, very successful. Jumi takes issue with the fact that Rooney writes about characters who talk openly about communism and complain about capitalism.
There were numerous times when the main characters reminded us that they had the right political opinions or mentioned that they were a communist or sympathetic to communism. because they're just like the author herself.
For someone who wants writing that forces readers to question your assumptions, Jumi seems uninterested in questioning assumptions. If you've been around young people in their 20s, it would be inaccurate to reality to depict them not discussing the ills of capitalism. This is the reality today. People are living in precarity, and young people are unafraid to discuss these topics with each other. I've only read one Sally Rooney book called Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I didn't love it. Her prose is very plain and the characters were bland to me after a while, but it's clear to me that she is interested in depicting the issues of being young and finding love. Is it especially deep? I mean, I don't think so. It's very funny to claim that all the readers of Sally Rooney are also Marxists. Like, these books are insanely popular. I'm pretty sure my aunt doesn't subscribe to or even think about the ideas of Karl Marx.
She shrugged and said, "It's something to do with capitalism." The guy responds, "Yeah, everything is. That's the problem, isn't it?" Could these people be more insufferable?
Jumi goes on to complain about a couple of other novels for their woke politics, but she is covering much of the same points. When discussing the book Decline of the Novel, she says,
I think this started sometime in the 20th century. At some point around then, literature became more focused on the self and self-expression. But have we overcorrected? Has literature become too much about self-expression at the expense of subject matters that are more profound? I'm a bit agnostic on this.
I struggle to understand exactly what she wants from contemporary literature besides leaving out woke subjects. She complains about stylistically innovative books and even rails against, get this, James Joyce and William Faulkner.
I do think that some of the works that have become hyper-focused on the interior got so myopic that they became unreadable. A lot of these fall under modernism, people like James Joyce or Faulkner.
Do you remember what Faulkner said about readers who don't understand his books after reading them 2 or 3 times? Read it a 4th time. I personally love novels that are challenging, and I love smaller publishers like Fitzcarraldo and Dalkey Archive, and they even show up at my local bookstore. There is wonderful, challenging fiction being written. It's just not going to be found on this table. And that's fine. It never has. I will say that Jumi wraps up this video with a fitting insight about this topic.
Also, it's possible to create an overly rosy picture of literature in the past because the books that have survived or became classics, maybe they're better than average. So it could be that proportionally there was just as much slop back then as well.
I mean, yeah, if you read the most popular books of, let's say, the 1920s, you will be shocked by how bad most of it is. We look into the past at art that has already stood the test of time. The Sound and the Fury did not win the Pulitzer Prize. Do you know what did? A book called Laughing Boy. I've never heard of that. I guess I'll try to sum things up by agreeing with Jumi on this. We should not be kept comfortable in our own political bubbles, and art should challenge us. But this video argues something different. It suggests wokeness is an all-consuming ideology and nothing good can be written with its inclusion, whatever wokeness even is. There's so much more to this conversation. I mean, this whole video is just about these types of literary books. A lot of publishing is chasing short-term trends, and so many writers are scared to let a book linger with a reader's thoughts. There's so much more to say about this, but I don't think that wokeness is the leading issue here. When I think about writers who confronted issues of their own time, I often think of Rod Serling, creator of The Twilight Zone. A fascinating person, a World War II vet who fought TV censors relentlessly, who advocated for civil rights. Would he be called woke if he were alive today? What do you think? I learned so much more about Rod Serling recently by watching the first episode of Captain Midnight's new series called Showrunners, that's on Nebula. I love Captain Midnight's videos on pop culture and movies, especially when he talks about late night TV. His exclusive Nebula series, Showrunners, focuses on those uniquely weird personalities capable of thriving on TV. How do their personalities bleed through their work? How has running a TV show changed over the decades? It's a terrific concept, and all of Captain Midnight's videos, along with a ton of other exclusive content from your favorite creators, is available on Nebula. Nebula is the largest creator-owned streaming platform in the world. It's where all your favorite creators like Tom Scott, Lindsay Ellis, Hello Future Me, create exciting new content. There's such a variety of thoughtful and brilliant videos on Nebula. It's my go-to these days when I sit down to watch TV. I usually check out Nebula before going to anything on Netflix or HBO. If you sign up using my link at go.nebula.tv/mancarryingthing or use the link below, you can get Nebula for 50% off, which is $30 a year or $250 a month. You can also get a monthly plan for $6 or a lifetime plan for $300, which usually costs $500. And for those of you that want to share everything Nebula has to offer with your family and friends, Nebula is now offering monthly, annual, and lifetime gift cards. Use the link gift.nebula.tv/mancarryingthing to give a month of Nebula to a friend for just $6, a year for $30, or a lifetime membership for $300, which without my link costs $500. Thank you for watching, everyone, and thanks as always for supporting the channel. Bye-bye.